Hey guys, today I want to um, just do a little code example around um, background work in an ASP.NET Core sample application. So this is Derek Comartin's YouTube channel, and he did a video here on um, talking about out-of-process jobs. And so what he did is he took this sample app from Microsoft, which is a .NET Core ASP sample, and he basically went through it looking for a place where maybe he could implement kind of taking some code and moving that to a background job. And so in his comments or in his video, he said, leave a comment or whatever if you have suggestions for what kind of technology you want him to use. So I sent him a message and said, hey, you should use Coravel, which is my open source framework-ish. I guess micro framework is technically what I call it here. So it does things like task scheduling. You can queue stuff in the background. Event broadcasting is what we'll do that today. I'll actually be using the event broadcasting and the queuing kind of together. Anyways, he said no. He said he doesn't want to use Coravel, but he did have plans already to kind of do more of a series with these. So here's his latest. So he's actually using Hangfire to do that, which is cool because Hangfire has a lot of kind of extra features that Coravel doesn't. But Coravel, I designed it to be kind of really easy to use. You don't have to install any database drivers or anything like that. It's just kind of out of the box, it works. So I'll show you where we're going to be doing this. First I'll log in to this sample app, and of course I want to be remembered. So when you click on this send verification email, it's not working right now. That's something we'll have to change, but okay, so there's a controller here that we'll be working in. So here's the method for that link, and actually there's an error here. This should be my account, so we'll just run that app, restart the app there. So while we are waiting for that to rerun, basically what Derek was talking about was ideally he would want all of this code to run in a background thread or as a background job. Why would you do that? Well, this is probably the biggest piece here is sending emails. So when we click on that link, or you're a user and you're clicking on a link, or you're doing some kind of action, if you're doing some kind of heavy I/O or some kind of like CPU heavy work that takes some time, if you're doing that inside the request that the user is the HTTP request that the user initiated, then they have to wait there until that work is finished, and that's not very good user experience. So what we can do is take this chunk of work and we can put it on a background thread. So all we need to do is just basically start that background thread, or just kind of queue it up, which doesn't take much time. So to the user, the experience is way better because they just kind of get instant response, and then we will handle all that work in the background. So let's do that. I'm going to simulate. This is just kind of a dummy method from the sample app. Let's actually simulate. We'll just simulate that this email takes 4 seconds to send. That's pretty. That's a long time, but if you're using something like SMTP, then maybe it would actually take that long. Sometimes SMTP can be pretty heavy. So I think that should work. And so that's just going to simulate the emails taking a while to send. All right, so let's go back to my account. So we should click it and it should take like 4 seconds to redirect. So yeah, we're waiting. Okay, so now it's done. So that was about 4 seconds. So you can see what I mean. As a user, I click on this and I have to wait. I can't do anything right now while it's loading in the browser. So ideally, we want to just shove that to the background, and that way the user can kind of get instant feedback. We get more, more responsive UI, and our system overall, our system can actually be more performant if we do that. So, like I said, we're going to use Coravel to do this. Let's install Coravel. So .NET add package Coravel. That will add the package to our .NET project, and we'll restore. Actually, I guess the restore is already done. That's all right. So we're going to set this up. Oops, I'm getting confused between Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code. All right, so we want to go configure services. So we need to add the queue, and we want to add events. Like I said, we're going to use both of these in conjunction. And now we need to go to configure, which is right here. And then we'll need this for later. So for right now, we'll leave that as it is, and we'll just step through kind of the steps to do this. So there's kind of some issues here that I want to talk about. This user manager is actually being injected here into the constructor of this controller. And also the email sender is as well. So one thing we have to keep in mind is we can't, if you use something like Hangfire and even Coravel, you can kind of just create a Lambda function or anonymous function, and here I'll show you. You do something like this, you would queue that up, something like that. So it would queue this in the background. The problem with that is this email sender would actually be null, because that is being injected through dependency injection. And what will happen is once the controller method is done, the DI scope will be complete, and it'll actually destroy all the objects that were injected. And so this task will be scheduled to run kind of later on, maybe a few milliseconds later or whatever. But that email sender will be destroyed. So we need a way that we can create like a self-contained job and pass that in ourselves. And so what I'm going to use is the event broadcasting that Coravel offers. So in this case, we're sending a verification email. So we're going to create an event. We'll call that user verified. It seems kind of appropriate here. And with Coravel, you have an iEvent interface. And there's some pieces of data that we'll need. We'll need email, and then a callback URL. And of course, we want to format that to make it look pretty. And so this is just kind of a dummy, it's a DTO. So in our controller, we are going to do, I'm going to pass a queue in here. Whoa. All right, let's fix that up. All right. So we'll go back to our verification email thing here. So we're going to create a new user verified event. So you can see here, what we need is we need the email and we need that callback URL. So that's why I put that in the event. Okay, so instead of doing that, we are going to grab the queue. So there's lots of methods that you can do. What we're looking at here is queue broadcast. So we want to take this event and we want to broadcast that event. And at the same time, we want to queue that broadcast. So we're doing it in the background. So it knows that we are, you can see the signature here. It knows that we're trying to broadcast this type. So what Coravel expects is that we create now event listeners that listen for those events. And whenever you emit those events, those listeners will be invoked. So we'll create a listener here. So this listener will call send verification email. It's pretty straightforward. So we're going to get that email sender. And this one is actually kind of a dummy interface that was created for this sample. All right, so Coravel has this iListener interface, and then you tell it which event that this is going to listen to, and then because of that, because of the generic that you have on the interface, it knows that you're going to need this method as a contract. So we're going to be passing in that event. And then we can just kind of paste in the code that we had from before. We'll just call that E for event. It'll just make it a little simpler. And so our event has the kind of those details that we needed. Oh, okay, that's an extension method. Again, the sample created all these. So that's done. Also, what we'll do is, okay, actually that delay is part of the extension method, so we don't need to add that. So we'll still see that. So what I'll do is we'll do console write line. If I can type. So we'll just do something like this. So we'll be able to see when it's starting, and then we'll put one at the end, just to show that it's actually doing some work. So I think that will work. There's just one last thing we'll need to do, and that is in the, actually we need to go to configure services. So what we will need to do is the event listener needs to be registered with the DI system. So that's our send verification email. So now that's rigged up to the DI system. So this email sender will actually be given to us from the DI container, and we don't have to worry about any of that. All the scoping issues I had talked about from being in the controller, we don't have to worry about that anymore. It's kind of all going to have its own scope. Okay, so here's the setting that Coravel has, and basically you can tell the queue how often it should try to consume all the jobs in the queue. The default is 30 seconds, which is kind of long, but the reason for that is so you don't like polling all the time. I put it to 5 just so it's kind of easy for us to see this. Now there is one other thing I forgot. That's why it wasn't running earlier. So we're going to go back down over here. So you need to actually register your events. So this would be your user verified. And then you want to tell it what listeners you're going to subscribe. That would be the send verification email. So now this should work. So we'll restart the app. And we should get, once we start queuing these emails up every 5 seconds, we'll start seeing those running in the console. Right, there we go. All right, so we'll click 1, 2, 3. Here's a few. So we should see those queued up. Okay, so you can see all of them are starting now. And they all finished. So one thing to note is you can see they all started kind of in parallel. And that's kind of one of the, I don't want to say unique things, but kind of a nice thing that Coravel does is it handles all of your jobs asynchronously. So doing things like await. So of course we're simulating that this email takes 4 seconds to actually do the I/O and call, let's say, an API or whatever, and then get that data back. So while this thread is going to call that, you're not actually blocking. So let's say your first job is calling your email. Now it's going to go to the second job and it's going to try to basically do that one next and then do this third one and so on. So it's doing all that asynchronous I/O in parallel, even though it's kind of using one thread very efficiently to handle all that stuff. And I'll probably look at doing some more videos like this, adding some more functionality to this app. One thing I'd like to do in the future is actually hook up Coravel Pro to this. So Coravel Pro is an admin UI that hooks, or it's compatible with Entity Framework Core. It basically gives you a nice back-end dashboard, and it also gives you the ability to have scheduling. So you can schedule your jobs from the UI. It'll persist your schedules to a database so you don't lose them. And you have background jobs that you can build. And then you see here, you can schedule them, or you can manually launch them. I don't have a screenshot here. There's other things like a CRUD UI, which would be fun to actually try to do that with this application. And then you have like metric dashboard and lots of other stuff, right? So it'd be fun to try to hook that up to this application and maybe do some videos on that. Well, I hope you enjoyed this, and I will just do one more thing. If you haven't seen already, Derek Comartin and I are doing a new YouTube channel, I guess, kind of like a podcast thing, called the Loosely Coupled Show. So we've already interviewed Steve Smith and Nate Barbatini. We did another session, Derek and I, about remote work and some other stuff. And we'll be recording another episode with Nate Barbatini soon, next week. So if you enjoy, talking about different things around architecture, for example, we talked about OAuth, GraphQL, event sourcing with Nate Barbatini. With Steve Smith, it was more like kind of basic architecture. But if you enjoy that stuff, you should check it out. Thanks, and if you like this, thumbs up and subscribe.